Racist cop arrests black woman, but her sealed authority file detonates his entire career in minutes. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The afternoon sun hung low over Riverside Plaza, turning the glass storefronts into shimmering mirrors while the steady hum of traffic echoed between the buildings. Amid the rush of people heading home from work, Alicia Grant walked with a quiet presence, her navy blazer perfectly pressed, her steps measured, her expression unreadable. She carried herself like someone used to observing rather than being seen, someone who understood how to blend into the background, even when she didn't intend to. Imagine standing there in the middle of a busy plaza, the late-day breeze brushing past your shoulders, when a shout slices through the noise. Officer Bradley Cole's voice carried that sharp tone only people drunk on authority manage to perfect. "You, ma'am, stop right there." His boots scuffed the pavement as he approached, one hand resting on his belt, the other signaling her to turn around. The crowd barely slowed. Some glanced over with mild curiosity, others with that familiar look, silent judgment wrapped in assumption. Alicia paused, her pulse steady, her breathing calm, the soft glow of the setting sun reflecting faintly off her glasses. She didn't argue. She didn't ask why. She simply lifted her hands slightly, an instinctive gesture of openness. Officer Cole circled her like he'd already made up his mind, his expression stiff as if authority lived permanently on his face. "Identification," he demanded, though his tone made it sound more like an accusation than a request. Alicia reached slowly into her bag and handed over her wallet. Cole flipped it open, glancing at her ID for less than a second before snapping it shut. "This doesn't look real," he muttered, loud enough for a few passers-by to hear. A couple of them slowed. Someone took out a phone. Alicia stood still, her shoulders relaxed, her eyes lowering slightly as if she had already accepted that today would test her patience in ways she wished it wouldn't. Cole moved behind her, speaking into his radio, the clipped phrases floating into the evening air. He didn't need confirmation. He just needed an audience. When he asked her to place her hands together, she complied, fingers interlacing gently. The metallic click of restraints echoed softly, not harsh or violent, but unmistakably final. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. She simply lifted her head, her gaze steady on the horizon, as if watching the moment unfold from outside her own body. People gathered now, a loose semicircle forming, whispers rising like a tide. "I knew something was off," someone said. "She looks too calm," another murmured. Through it all, Alicia remained composed, her expression neither angry nor afraid, just quietly observant, almost analytical, like a person studying a scene rather than being trapped in it. And somewhere inside that calm, beneath the measured breath and the silent endurance, lived a truth no one here could imagine. Alicia Grant knew exactly who she was. And in a matter of minutes, the world around her would know too. Officer Bradley Cole guided Alicia Grant toward the patrol vehicle with an air of self-importance, as if the gathering crowd existed only to validate his decisions. The late afternoon light had softened into a warm amber, casting long shadows across Riverside Plaza. Yet Alicia moved with the same quiet steadiness she had shown from the beginning, her gaze drifting across the rows of parked cars and reflective windows as if committing every detail to memory. Imagine standing there, monitoring the smallest shifts in the environment, while people around you reacted to assumptions they had already decided were true. A man near the edge of the crowd whispered that the situation looked suspicious, while another lifted his phone higher, hoping for a more dramatic angle. None of them knew that Alicia's breathing stayed, even because she had trained for years to hold her composure under far greater pressure than this. Officer Cole opened the back door of the vehicle, his expression tinged with impatience when Alicia hesitated for the briefest moment, only to step inside with grace instead of distress. The soft interior light illuminated her features, calm and clear, without any trace of panic. She adjusted her glasses gently and looked through the window as Cole shut the door. The plaza blurred behind the tinted glass, the shapes of bystanders shrinking as the vehicle rolled forward through evening traffic. The rhythmic hum of the engine filled the enclosed space, creating a fragile quiet where Alicia allowed herself a single slow breath. She noticed how the city's neon signs flickered to life, dancing across the surface of passing buildings. She focused on those reflections, as if measuring the time she had left before everything shifted. At the front of the car, Officer Cole narrated the situation into his radio with the confidence of someone who believed he had intercepted something significant. "Possible identification fraud," he said. "Subject remains unusually calm." His tone carried a subtle satisfaction, the kind that blooms when someone thinks they have caught a person who will not fight back. Alicia listened without reacting. She simply folded her hands neatly in her lap, her fingers resting lightly together. The cityscape thinned as the car approached the precinct, a rectangular building with bright exterior lights that cut sharp lines across the pavement. The moment Alicia stepped out, she felt the temperature change, the cooler shade of early evening settling over the concrete walkway. Officer Cole walked ahead with brisk authority, gesturing for her to follow. Inside, the lobby's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, their brightness reflecting off polished floors. Officers moved between desks, papers rustling, phones ringing, the air thick with routine. And yet, something subtle shifted when Alicia entered. A few people glanced up, some briefly, others with lingering curiosity. Alicia could nearly feel the assumptions forming in their minds, the silent conclusions drawn from nothing more than her appearance and her silence. She walked with steady steps, her posture measured, each movement purposeful. Officer Cole guided her toward the processing area, speaking loudly enough for nearby officers to hear about the uncooperative suspect he had brought in. She observed the room quietly, noting the placement of the cameras, the arrangement of the computers, and the patterns of movement among the staff. Even in the middle of it all, she carried the stillness of someone who understood exactly how these moments would matter later. She lifted her eyes toward the far hallway, where a secured door stood slightly ajar, a narrow strip of blue light glowing from the panel beside it. In that small glow, in that quiet hum, Alicia knew the turning point was already within reach. She simply had to wait for the system to recognize what Officer Cole refused to see. The faint buzz of the precinct's overhead lights filled the quiet space around Alicia Grant as she stood near the intake counter, her wrists resting calmly against one another, her posture composed despite Officer Bradley Cole's increasingly animated commentary to anyone within earshot. He spoke with the energy of someone convinced he had uncovered a major offense, pacing slightly as he recounted his version of the events at Riverside Plaza. Alicia listened without interruption, her eyes softly focused on the reflections in the polished floor, watching the movement of officers passing by like shifting silhouettes. Imagine standing there, surrounded by people making conclusions about you before hearing a single fact, and yet feeling no need to defend yourself because you already knew how temporary their assumptions were. A young desk officer named Daniel Reed glanced up at Alicia briefly, his expression uncertain. He opened a new intake form on his computer, his fingers hesitating over the keyboard as if something about her calmness unsettled his expectations. "Is she ready for processing?" he asked softly. Officer Cole nodded with exaggerated confidence. "Absolutely. Identification inconsistency and suspicious intent." His voice carried that familiar tone of someone narrating for an invisible audience. Alicia shifted her gaze toward the hallway again, sensing the subtle hum of the secured system behind its closed doors. She could almost track the cadence of the electronic checks running beneath the surface, the way the network evaluated every new entry into the building. She had spent years studying these systems from the highest vantage point possible, and she knew their timing as precisely as she knew her own heartbeat. Officer Cole handed her identification to Officer Reed, who scanned it into the system. A soft chime sounded from the computer, followed by a spinning icon that lingered longer than usual. Reed's brow furrowed slightly. "System is taking a moment," he murmured, tapping the screen lightly, as if that would speed things up. Alicia lowered her gaze, exhaling a controlled breath. She had anticipated this moment since the plaza. The system did not rush when it encountered something classified. It paused, cross-referenced, then verified through layers of encrypted channels that were far beyond the clearance level of anyone in this room. Officer Cole leaned over the counter impatiently. "It is probably a fake ID triggering. Extra checks. Just override it and move on." Reed hesitated, glancing at him. "I cannot override a federal verification cycle," he said quietly. "The system will reject it." The hum in the hallway grew faintly louder, as if answering him. A light above the secure door blinked from soft blue to a steady green, a transition most people would overlook. Alicia noticed immediately. Her posture remained unchanged, but something in her eyes tightened, the slightest shift of focus that suggested a turning point approaching. The computer let out a sharper chime, one that did not belong to routine intake. Reed stared at the screen, confusion flooding his features. The spinning icon froze, and a new line of text appeared, glowing with unmistakable clarity. His mouth parted slightly, though he made no sound. Officer Cole leaned in again, irritated. "What now?" he demanded. Reed did not answer. His eyes were locked on whatever only he could see. Alicia lifted her chin, her expression calm, almost serene, as if acknowledging a truth that was finally stepping into the room. She knew that in the next breath, the atmosphere around them would shift in ways Officer Cole could not possibly anticipate. The system had recognized her. The sealed authority file was opening. A hush fell over the intake counter as the computer continued processing Alicia Grant's credentials, the screen's glow reflecting faintly across Officer Daniel Reed's glasses. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, unmoving, while the soft hum of the precinct's ventilation system filled the silence. Officer Bradley Cole stood beside him, arms crossed, shifting his weight with growing impatience, unaware that the atmosphere around them was tightening like an invisible thread pulling the room's focus toward a single point. Imagine standing there, watching a system you thought you controlled suddenly respond in a way you never expected, its behavior slipping out of your hands as if it had its own judgment. Alicia remained calm, her posture relaxed, her eyes steady on the illuminated screen as if she already knew what it contained. The secure door at the end of the hallway emitted a faint, rhythmic beep, as though syncing with the terminal's verification cycle. Reed swallowed, his throat tightening as a new message populated on the screen. It was subtle at first, a line of text shifting from gray to white before expanding into a detailed classification header. His breath caught slightly. Officer Cole leaned forward. "What does it say?" The system probably flagged it as fraudulent. Reed did not answer. His eyes widened a fraction as he scrolled, his posture straightening as if trying to comprehend something far beyond the routine checks he was used to. He cleared his throat softly, unable to hide the slight tremor in his voice. Alicia watched him, her expression gentle, almost reassuring, as though she understood the weight settling onto his shoulders. The terminal chimed again, this time deeper, a tone that belonged to high-level federal systems. The secure door's light shifted from green to amber, indicating a higher-tier authentication link engaging. Officers nearby paused mid-task, glancing toward the sound with confusion. It was not a tone the precinct heard often. Cole exhaled loudly. "This is wasting time. If the ID is triggering that many errors, just put it through manual processing." Reed finally turned toward him. "It is not an error," he said quietly. "It is a priority override protocol." Cole blinked, unamused. "And what?" He stepped closer, but Reed shielded the screen slightly, not out of secrecy, but out of sheer uncertainty. Alicia shifted her gaze toward the secure door. The amber light pulsed softly, and a thin line of blue illumination traced around the edges of the panel as encrypted systems synced across federal channels. She recognized the sequence immediately. Her sealed authority file was being accessed layer by layer, in a process only a handful of government departments were authorized to initiate. The room grew noticeably still. Officers at nearby desks lowered their voices, sensing something unusual. Even the clerical staff paused mid-sentence. It was as if the precinct itself held its breath. The computer emitted one final chime, prolonged and resonant. On the screen, a large emblem appeared, crisp and unmistakable, followed by a line of text that made Officer Reed's face pale. His eyes flicked to Alicia, then back to the screen, then to Cole, who was still waiting for an explanation with an air of growing irritation. Alicia lowered her hand slightly, her tone calm and measured. "The system has completed the verification," she said gently. "You may want to read what it says." The truth had arrived, clear and undeniable, ready to rewrite the assumptions that had filled the room only minutes earlier. Officer Daniel Reed's eyes moved slowly across the glowing text on the screen, his breath tightening as each line revealed more than he ever expected to see inside a small city precinct on an ordinary evening. The emblem at the top shimmered under the monitor's light, its federal seal unmistakable, its authority impossible to question. A soft hum radiated from the secured door down the hallway, as if the systems behind it were aligning to the identity the computer had just confirmed. Officer Bradley Cole leaned in, confusion shifting into irritation as he tried to interpret Reed's silence. "What does it say?" he demanded again, his tone sharp with impatience. Reed did not immediately respond. He lifted his hands slightly from the desk, as if steadying himself before speaking. Alicia Grant waited with a calmness that seemed almost unreal in the charged air, the kind of composure that comes from someone who has spent years standing in rooms where truth arrives slowly but lands with undeniable weight. Imagine watching the moment when a person who had assumed complete control begins to sense that the ground beneath him is shifting, even though he cannot yet see why. Reed finally cleared his throat, the sound soft but tense. "This identification is not fraudulent," he said carefully. "It is connected to a sealed federal authority file." Cole blinked, confused. "A sealed what?" "A sealed authority file," Reed repeated, his voice still low. "Level 7 clearance. That is the highest classification I have ever seen cross this system." Cole scoffed, shaking his head as though refusing to let the words sink in. "That cannot be right." She was standing in a plaza with a shopping bag. "She's just keeping quiet because she knows she was caught." Reed slowly turned the monitor so Cole could see him more clearly. Cole stepped forward, the confidence in his stride faltering when he saw the bold text stamped across the top of the verification window. His eyes flicked from the emblem to Alicia, then back to the screen, his brows drawing together as if trying to force the information into a version that fit his assumptions. Alicia watched him with the same gentle stillness she had carried from the beginning. She did not gloat, did not smirk, did not lean forward. Her silence held no hostility, only understanding. She had witnessed this reaction before, more times than she wished to count. The secure door at the end of the hallway unlocked, with a soft metallic click, followed by a low tone that signaled an automatic update to the entire precinct's clearance hierarchy. Several officers looked up, puzzled. It was not a sound typical of local operations. One of the senior officers, Captain Laura Simmons, stepped out from the restricted area, her expression alert as she noticed the cluster forming around the intake counter. Her gaze landed on Alicia, then shifted to the screen, widening slightly as she recognized the classification code. She approached with measured steps, each one echoing lightly in the suddenly quiet lobby. "What is happening here?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already sensed the answer. Reed gestured toward the screen. "Captain, the system initiated a federal override." Simmons leaned in, her breath catching faintly when she read the confirmation line identifying Alicia Grant by her full classified title. She straightened slowly, her eyes lifting to meet Alicia's. For the first time since entering the precinct, Alicia offered a small, calm nod, an acknowledgement shared only between people who understood the gravity of federal protocols. Cole looked between them all, uncertainty spreading across his face. The assumptions he had relied on so confidently were dissolving, piece by piece, replaced by a reality he had never prepared himself to face. And as the truth settled into the room, Alicia's quiet voice carried gently across the space. "I believe the system has more to show," she said. And it did. The precinct seemed to hold its breath as the computer refreshed once more, the glow from the monitor casting a muted reflection across Alicia Grant's comm features. Captain Laura Simmons kept her eyes on the screen, her posture steady but unmistakably alert, as if bracing for information that would reshape the room. Officer Bradley Cole shifted uneasily, confusion flickering through his expression every few seconds as he tried to reconcile the narrative he had built with the reality beginning to unfold. Imagine watching the moment when a person who believed they controlled the situation starts to sense that the truth is far larger than their assumptions, and there is no way to reverse the momentum of what is coming. The terminal emitted a soft but distinct tone, a sound layered with deeper security coding, and a new section of the sealed file opened. Lines of classified designation codes scrolled across the screen, each one revealing more about the identity. Behind the name Alicia Grant, Officer Daniel Reed's eyes widened slightly as he read. "This is a deputy director credential," he whispered, almost to himself. "Homeland Security upper executive clearance." Cole blinked in disbelief, his voice breaking slightly. "That cannot be right. She was just standing there acting suspicious. That cannot be real." His words sounded thinner now, lacking the confidence they carried earlier in the plaza. Captain Simmons exhaled slowly, adjusting the collar of her uniform as she examined the verification signatures. "It is not only real," she said quietly. "It is authenticated at level 7. This is the level that overrides our entire precinct hierarchy." Alicia watched the reactions unfold with soft, steady eyes. There was no triumph in her expression, no trace of satisfaction. Her stillness carried something deeper, a quiet recognition of how often moments like this took shape, how familiar the pattern felt even when the faces changed. She allowed a breath to flow gently from her chest, controlled and even. The secure door down the hallway lit up again, this time shifting into a steady green accompanied by a deeper confirmation tone. Officers around the lobby turned toward the sound. A few exchanged glances, quietly sensing that something rare was happening. "A federal channel has been engaged," Reed said, reading the display. "The system is awaiting her confirmation to unlock the higher-tier access." Cole's confusion hardened into hesitation. "You mean she can unlock it?" Reed nodded. Captain Simmons looked toward Alicia. "Ms. Grant, or should I say Deputy Director, the system is requesting your verification phrase." Alicia stepped forward slightly, her posture poised and unhurried. She spoke with a voice steady enough to fill the room without raising its volume. "Yes," she said, "because the sealed authority file is tied directly to my operational identity." Cole's mouth parted, but no words came. Alicia placed her palms lightly on the counter, her gentle touch activating the biometric sensor Reed had not even noticed was part of the intake desk. A pale blue light scanned across her hands. The computer paused, then displayed a single, unmistakable line, "Identity confirmed." The entire room softened into silence, the kind that carries inevitability. Alicia lifted her gaze toward Cole, her expression calm, almost compassionate. "Now," she said quietly, "the system will show you why it took so long." And with a final chime, the next page of her file opened, illuminating the truth that would shift everything that came after. The next page of the sealed file unfolded across the monitor with a quiet precision, each line of classified information appearing as though the system understood the weight of revealing it. The glow from the screen illuminated Alicia Grant's calm expression, highlighting the steady focus in her eyes as the officers around her leaned in with a mixture of disbelief and dawning understanding. Captain Laura Simmons read the opening lines silently, her posture straightening as if instinctively aligning herself with the gravity of what she was seeing. Officer Daniel Reed shifted slightly, his breath catching when he recognized the significance of several operational codes embedded in the file. Officer Bradley Cole, however, stood frozen, his earlier certainty dissolving into an unsteady confusion that left him grasping for context he did not have. Imagine standing there, watching someone slowly realize that every assumption they made had been built on sand, and the tide was finally coming in. The screen displayed Alicia's official designation, Deputy Director of Strategic Operations for the Department of Homeland Security. Beneath it were encrypted references to federal oversight assignments, internal audits, and operations that required clearance most agencies could only imagine. Captain Simmons exhaled quietly. "This is unprecedented," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. Alicia remained still, her voice soft but unmistakably steady when she finally spoke. "The sealed authority file only opens when the system detects a situation requiring full verification," she said. "Your system did exactly what it was designed to do." Cole shook his head, as if refusing to accept the reality settling around him. "There is no way. Someone like you." He stopped himself, the unfinished sentence hanging in the air, heavy with the weight of its implication. Alicia met his gaze, her expression gentle rather than harsh. She did not respond to the words he could not finish. Instead, she let the silence answer for her. The computer emitted another chime, revealing a summary of her current assignment. It outlined her presence in Riverside as part of an unannounced evaluation of local law enforcement response protocols, a program designed to measure professionalism, bias awareness, and adherence to federal standards. A hush spread across the room as the meaning settled in. Reed stepped back slightly, his eyes widening. "She was evaluating us," he whispered. "This was a compliance audit." "Captain." Simmons closed her eyes for a brief moment, realization washing over her features. "And we were not informed," she said softly, "which means the behavior she witnessed today becomes part of the federal assessment." Cole swallowed hard, his shoulders tensing as the implication finally reached him. He had not stopped to listen. He had not paused to question his assumptions. And now the evidence documenting every decision he made was sitting on a federal screen that he had no power to change. Alicia lifted her hands gently, the soft click of the biometric restraints releasing as the system recognized her confirmed status. She lowered her arms with quiet grace, the indentation on her wrists fading under the bright overhead lights. She looked toward Captain Simmons. "The system will generate a full incident report," she said. "It is the next step." Simmons nodded slowly, her tone respectful. "Deputy Director, we will comply." Cole felt the room tilt around him, the truth landing with a weight that left no room for denial. And Alicia stood there calmly, embodying the quiet certainty of a person who never needed to raise her voice for the truth to be heard. The precinct lobby settled into a stillness that felt almost tangible, as if every sound in the room had softened in recognition of what had just unfolded. Captain Laura Simmons remained beside the monitor, her gaze fixed on the glowing lines of the incident report now being generated automatically. Officer Daniel Reed stood nearby, his expression a mixture of respect and quiet realization, while Officer Bradley Cole lingered several steps back, his posture stiff, as though he was bracing himself against a truth he could no longer deny. Alicia Grant did not move immediately. She allowed the quiet to stretch, giving the room space to absorb the reality displayed on the screen. Her breathing remained even, her presence grounded, her gaze steady as she observed the subtle shift in the attitudes of those around her. Imagine standing there, knowing that the truth had always been on your side, yet choosing patience over reaction because you understood that clarity arrived more powerfully when it was allowed to reveal itself. The report continued processing, each line building on the next with methodical precision. It listed timestamps of the plaza encounter, system logs, and verification signatures that confirmed her identity beyond any possible dispute. Cole rubbed the back of his neck, his earlier bravado replaced with a quiet discomfort. His eyes moved between Alicia and the file, as if searching for a version of events where his assumptions had not played such a central role. There was none. Captain Simmons finally turned toward Alicia, her voice steady. "Deputy Director, the system has compiled the initial documentation. It is ready for your confirmation." Alicia offered a small nod and stepped toward the counter. Her movements were composed, her hands steady as she placed her fingers on the biometric pad to authorize the next step. A soft light scanned across her fingertips, and the system acknowledged her with a calm, clear tone. The report finalized itself with a quiet efficiency, displaying a summary at the bottom of the screen. It outlined the events from the moment she entered Riverside Plaza to the moment her sealed file activated, noting her compliance, her calm demeanor, and the necessity for further evaluation of the precinct's procedural adherence. Captain Simmons read each line carefully, her face tightening with responsibility rather than defensiveness. She understood what the document meant for her department. She turned to Cole. "Officer Cole," she said, her tone measured, "the system has flagged your actions for immediate review. You will need to step aside while we cooperate with the federal process." Cole's posture faltered, his shoulders lowering as the weight of the situation settled onto him. He looked at Alicia, uncertainty clouding his expression. There was no hostility in her gaze, only clarity. Reed stepped forward gently. "Deputy Director, is there anything else you require from us at this stage?" he asked, his tone respectful. Alicia looked toward the secured hallway where the federal channel had been activated. The soft green light still pulsed steadily, signifying that the system was linked and awaiting further instruction. "Yes," she said softly. "There is one more step before the federal office receives the full report." Reed nodded slowly. "What do you need?" Alicia lifted her chin slightly, her voice calm and unwavering. "I need the precinct to acknowledge the system's findings so the chain of verification can be completed." Captain Simmons stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We acknowledge it," she said. "Fully." The confirmation registered instantly, the system's tone echoing gently through the room. It was the sound of truth aligning itself, the sound of accountability settling into place. Alicia exhaled a quiet breath, her composure unwavering. The moment had arrived, the point where the truth left the room and began its journey through every level of oversight that waited beyond these walls. The precinct's acknowledgement pulsed through the system with a soft confirmation tone, and for a brief moment, the entire lobby felt suspended in a quiet clarity. The green light above the secured hallway shifted into a steady blue, indicating that the federal network had received the verification and was preparing to synchronize the full incident report. Alicia Grant stood in the center of the room, her posture calm, her breath steady, the faint overhead lights reflecting gently across the smooth surface of the biometric pad she had just released. Officers moved carefully around her now, their steps slower, their voices quiet, as if recognizing the significance of the moment unfolding in their presence. Imagine watching a room recalibrate itself, every assumption being replaced with understanding, every glance shifting from doubt to respect. Captain Laura Simmons stepped closer, her expression composed, but carrying the weight of someone who understood that her department's actions were about to be examined with precision. "Deputy Director," she said softly, "the network indicates that the documentation is ready to be transmitted." Alicia nodded, her voice gentle yet steady. "Once the transmission begins, the system will generate a time-stamped record of every action taken from the beginning of the plaza encounter to this moment. The federal office will evaluate each segment individually." Officer Daniel Reed stood beside the desk, his hands folded in front of him, a quiet seriousness in his expression. He glanced briefly at Officer Bradley Cole, who remained several steps back, shoulders lowered, the silence around him thicker than the air itself. The earlier confidence he had carried like an invisible shield was gone, replaced by a dawning awareness of how fully the truth had unfolded. Alicia shifted her gaze to the screen one last time, ensuring the summary matched the events exactly as they occurred. The system displayed the final line, awaiting Deputy Director authorization. She placed her hand on the authentication sensor. A soft blue light scanned her palm, and the system responded with a gentle chime. The report transmitted instantly, the confirmation message appearing with a quiet certainty that left no room for doubt. Captain Simmons inclined her head. "The federal office will contact us for next steps," she said. "We will cooperate." "Fully." Alicia offered a slight nod, her demeanor warm but reserved. She had seen this process play out in different forms across the country, but each moment carried its own weight. She turned slightly toward Cole, her expression calm, not accusatory. There was no anger in her voice, no bitterness, only truth. "Officer Cole," she said softly, "the system will guide the next phases. It is important that you respond honestly and completely throughout the review." Cole swallowed, his voice quiet. "I understand." Alicia held his gaze for a brief moment, not to admonish him, but to leave him with a clarity he had lacked earlier. The sealed file had revealed more than her identity. It had illuminated the choices that each person in the room had made. She stepped away from the desk, moving with a composed grace toward the exit. The automatic doors opened with a soft sigh, letting in the cool evening air. The plaza outside glowed under the fading light, the reflections from storefront windows shimmering gently across the pavement. As she walked forward, each step carried the calm assurance of someone who understood that justice did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it came through a screen's quiet glow, through a system's unfailing memory, through truth written in lines no one could overwrite. Behind her, the precinct remained still, the weight of the moment settling like a quiet echo. And in that echo lived a simple truth. Some stories do not end with confrontation. They end with clarity.